Hello friends, myself Sonia John, Assistant Professor in Bihani Institute of Science and Management. Today I am going to deliver a lecture on peptic ulcer. As we know, the food which we eat, it enters through our mouth and then through our mouth it will enter into the esophagus, and from esophagus it will enter into the stomach. There it is stored, and for digestion and absorption then it is further goes to the intestines. So it is a disease condition which affects the esophagus, the stomach and the duodenum, which is one of the part of the GI tract. So today first we move on to the definition. It is a break in the continuity of esophagus, gastric, duodenal mucosa. It may occur in any part of the gastrointestinal tract that comes in contact with the gastric juice. That is, this peptic ulcer, it affects the mostly it affects the esophagus and the esophagogastric mucosa, and the places or the parts or the portions which come in contact with the gastric juice. So what happens in this? There will be a break in the continuity of the mucosa, that is the mucosa or the membranes that have been protected. So these are been damaged, or there will be breakdown occurs in these parts. Next we move on to the incidence. Incidence is approximately 10% of the population, that is 10% of the populations are affected by peptic ulcer. So what happens? The incidence is that in a place where of population there will be 10% of the persons will be affected with peptic ulcer. Next, types. There are three types. First is the gastric ulcer, then duodenal ulcer and esophageal ulcer. The ulcer or ulcer which occurs in the stomach, it is termed as gastric ulcer, and the ulcer which affects the duodenum, that is called duodenal ulcer, and esophageal, that affects the or breaks down the mucosa of esophagus, is known as esophageal ulcer. Next we move on to the causes or etiology. Etiology first is over secretion of acid, that is due to any intake of any drugs, or if the person is taking fast for a long period. So these all are the causes that there will be over secretion of acid. We know that in our stomach HCl is produced, so there will be, then HCl production is because of a nerve, that is vagus nerve. So when this happens, what happens when a person takes fast and all, this vagus nerve gets stimulated, and because of that stimulation there will be over secretion of the acid. Second point is infection of Helicobacter pylori, that is the person may be infected by an organism or bacteria which is known as Helicobacter pylori. So if there will be any infection because of this organism, or the presence of this organism may lead to peptic ulcer, and there will be break in the continuity of the mucosa. Next, side effects of NSAIDs. NSAIDs are the non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs. That is, when a person takes these drugs, so what happens? The mucosa gets breakdown, or because of the hypersecretion of the acid, what happens? There will be breakdown in the mucosa. Next we move on to the pathophysiology. Pathophysiology according to gastric ulcer, I am going to tell you first, that is due to etiological factors. Etiological factors, that is we have seen over secretion of acid, infection by Helicobacter pylori, or side effects of non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs. So what happens due to this etiology or due to these causes? There will be ulceration formed. So the ulceration, how it forms? Due to etiological factors, that if the person takes if the person smokes, or sorry, if the person take tea or caffeinated beverages, and if the person have NSAIDs. So because of the side effects of NSAIDs, these occur. So what happened? Due to these etiological factors, excessive secretion of the HCl and increased mucus secretion. So what happens when these causative factors affect on the person? So what happened? There will be excessive secretion of HCl, that is the vagus nerve will be stimulated more, and there will be production of more HCl, and HCl will be secreted abundantly, and there will be decreased mucus secretion. So as a result of increased secretion of HCl, the mucus will be secreted in a less amount. So what happens? This mucus lining, or this mucus protects the stomach lining. So what happens? If excessive secretion is there, then there will be breakdown of the mucous membrane of the stomach. So what happens when etiological causes, excessive secretion of HCl and decreased mucus secretion? There will be breakdown, so that there will be breakdown in the mucous membrane. After breakdown of the mucous membrane, that will lead to acid into the gastric mucosa, as this mucosal barrier will be there. So when this hypersecretion will occur, then what happen? The mucosal barrier will not able to save the mucosa. So what happens? As an after effect of that, the acid will enter into the gastric mucosa. So the acid will enter into the gastric or the stomach mucosa, and because of that, gastric ulcer will occur. Once again I will say, that is due to the etiological factors, there will be excessive secretion of the HCl and decreased mucus secretion. So because of the causes or because of the etiology, there will be excessive secretion of the mucus. So acid will be secreted, and there will be this mucus secretion will decrease. As the acid is increasing, there will be decreased mucosal barrier will not act properly, and there will be breakdown in the mucous membrane. So as a result of this, there will be, what happens? The acid enter into the gastric mucosa, and because of that, gastric ulcer will occur. So this is the pathophysiology. Next we move on to the pathophysiology of duodenal ulcers. I have told that the ulcers which occur in the duodenum is known as duodenal ulcer. So the etiology for duodenal ulcers are due to fasting period, that is if the person is taking any fast, so he will be empty stomach for a long period of time. So because of that, due to fasting period, there will be stimulation of the vagus nerve. In our stomach or in our gastric place, we can see that there will be vagus nerves are there which stimulate the HCl secretion. So because of this fasting period, what happens? There will be stimulation of this vagus nerve. The vagus nerve will be stimulated. So if this vagus nerve when stimulates, there will be increased gastric secretion. So due to this fasting period, there will be stimulation of the vagus nerve, and this increases the gastric secretion. So there will be increased gastric secretion. Because of this increased gastric secretion, there will be increased secretion of HCl level, that is the HCl level will be increased, and which leads to duodenal ulcers. So what happens due to the fasting period? What will happen? This will stimulate the vagus nerve. Fasting period will stimulate the vagus nerve, and as an effect of that, there will be increased gastric secretion. So when the gastric secretion will be increased, there will be increased secretion or increased production of hydrochloric acid, and which leads to duodenal ulcer. Next we move on to the clinical manifestations. Clinical manifestations, mainly the clinical manifestations we can see in peptic ulcer is pain. So the pain will be episodic in nature, that will last to 30 minutes to 2 hours. So the pain will be lasting from 30 minutes to 2 hours. And the next, that is how we can understand is that there will be pain in the epigastric locations. There are certain regions of stomach like epigastric region, hypochondriac region, like that. So there will be pain will be in the epigastric region. So there will be epigastric location pain near midline, epigastric pain near midline, which may radiate from costal place to costal border to back. So the pain will be episodic in nature and which will last from 30 minutes to 2 hours, and there will be epigastric pain in the location, that is epigastric region. There will be pain in the epigastric region near the midline of the midline in the epigastric location, and which will radiate, that is it will radiate from costal border to back. Then there will be burning sensation with aches. So the person will be suffering from burning sensation. The person will have burning sensation along with aches. Then the pain occurs at 1 to 3 hours after meals and at night. That is when the person have taken food. After taking his food or after taking his meal, the person will be suffering from pain from 1 to 3 hours or at night. Then relief by food and antacids. When the person intakes the food, so what happens? The gastric mucosa which has been gone irritated, and because of the HCl secretion, hypersecretion of HCl, so that will be relieved by taking food and antacids. So next, other clinical manifestations included are dyspepsia, nausea and vomiting, anorexia and weight loss. We know dyspepsia means indigestion, that is there will be not properly digestion taking place. Then nausea and vomiting. Nausea means feeling of vomiting, and vomiting, expulsion of the food contents which have been entered into the gastric mucosa and the backflow of the food from the stomach to the mouth. Then anorexia. Anorexia means the loss of appetite, and weight loss. As the person will not be able to, there will be loss of appetite, so the patient may automatically lose weight. So the clinical manifestations include pain, that is episodic and which will last from 30 to 2 hours, and there will be epigastric location, pain will be there in the epigastric location near the midline and which may radiate around the costal border to the back. Then there will be burning sensation with aches, and pain occurs at 1 to 3 hours after meals and at night. Then this can be relieved, or this pain can be relieved by giving by the person, if the person takes or the person intake of food, and through antacids. Antacids are the drugs which are given to release the acidity of the stomach. Then others include dyspepsia, nausea, vomiting, anorexia, weight loss. Next we move on to the diagnostic evaluations. The diagnostic evaluations include physical examination. A thorough examination of the person or the gastric place takes that the diagnosis will be taken place. So next is history collection. History collection. The person's history should be collected, whether person at what time the person is taking food or he is taking any fast and all. So the thorough history should be collected from the patient. Then the urine analysis, that is the urine test should be analyzed and the urine test should be done. Then liver enzyme test. So the person's LFT, that is liver enzyme test should be done. Then Helicobacter pylori. If there is any presence of the bacteria, I have told that Helicobacter is the causative factor. So if there is any presence of the Helicobacter pylori, to determine that, we are using this Helicobacter pylori test for in the urine and blood, that is in the urine or blood. If there is any presence of bacteria, to assess that we are doing Helicobacter pylori test. Then endoscopy. Endoscopy is done, that is, an endoscope is a scope through which is inserted through the esophagus to the gastric place, and where there it is assessed that the peptic ulcer or the ulcer is to what extent, to visualize the internal part. So for that only endoscopy is done, and biopsy is also done if there is any carcinoma and all. To detect that, endoscopy with biopsy is performed. Then barium study. Barium study is that in which a barium meal is given to the patient, and after that there will be X-ray done, and the person's internal organs will be visualized properly, and this is how the ulceration is assessed, and to what extent it leads, it can be assessed through barium study. So we have seen the duodenal ulcers pathophysiology. Due to fasting period, there will be stimulation of vagus nerve, increases gastric secretion, which leads to increased secretion of HCl level, then which will leads to duodenal ulcer. Also we have seen clinical manifestations. Pain will be episodic, which will last to 30 to 2 hours. Epigastric pain, location near midline, radiate round, costal border to this. Then others include dyspepsia, nausea, vomiting, anorexia, weight loss. Then we have seen the diagnostic evaluation. Diagnostic evaluation we have seen physical examination, history collection, urine analysis, then endoscopy with biopsy, then Helicobacter pylori tested for blood and urine, whether there is any presence of bacteria in the blood and urine, and also the barium study to assess the ulceration level of the person. Then next we move on to the management. Management includes, first the person should be given adequate rest, that is, as a period of fasting, and sometimes the person is not getting proper rest. So what happens, there will be increased secretion of hydrochloric acids, and sometimes because of the intake of coffee, tea, like this beverages, and sometimes the person, if the person takes excessive, or if the person smokes excessively, these are also factors for causing peptic ulcer. Patient should be given adequate rest, and he should be encouraged to avoid caffeinated beverages like tea and coffee, and he should be discouraged for smoking. So in management, there should be, first I have told that the patient should take proper rest, and then the patient should avoid caffeinated beverages like tea, coffee, and there will be, and the person have to take cessation of smoking, that is, the person should not smoke. Next, the management comes the diet, that is, the person should take a balanced diet. The meal should be a balanced diet, and the person should take 3 times a day a meal. So the person should take 3 times meal a day, and the patient should contain all and take all nutritious type of food, and the diet should contain a balanced type of food. So under that diet, the person should have balanced diet, and the person should take 3 meals a day, and there should be, between this meal there should be there should be snacking between these meals. So, and the person should not take food at night, because if the person takes food at night, so what happens, there will be increased, there are stimulation, and which leads to stimulation, and there will be hyper secretion of the acid. The person should not take meals, the person should not take between snacks at night. Then the patient should eat the food slowly, and chew the food properly. The person should eat the food properly and slowly, and the person should chew the food properly. Next, the management comes under is the smoking. That smoking, what happens, the person should not smoke, because these are the factors which increase or which helps the acid to produce. So because of these, there will be increased secretion. So what happens, the person should asked to stop smoking, and there should be community exploration for the person to for the person or the people with smoke or the smokers for their cessation. So there will be community explorer for the support of cessation of smoking. Then stress reduction. For reducing stress, the person should be given recreational activities, or they should be indulged in their hobbies, and these all things will help the person to promote relaxation. So the person will be relieved from stress, and the person's stress will be reduced, so that for that only the person will be indulged in some recreational activities or the activities which he like his hobbies, and which helps to relax the person's mind or relieve his stress. Next is the person should do some aerobic exercises, that is which helps the person to reduce from their stress. So the person should be indulge in some aerobic exercises. Next we move on to the surgical management. Surgical management, first comes the vagotomy. Vagotomy means the that the incision is done and the vagus nerve is cut. So this we can see in this picture. This there is a this is the stomach, and this we can see the vagus nerves, and this here there the vagus nerve is cut and vagotomy is done. So because of this thing, what happens, there will be decreased secretion. So what happened, it will not stimulate the vagus nerve, and there will not be hyper secretion. So for that this vagotomy is performed. Then atherectomy. Atherectomy includes the affected part, that is the affected portion is removed. So atherectomy includes the affected part. Next, Billroth 1 procedure. Billroth 1 procedure includes gastroduodenostomy. So what happened, the part which has been affected, that has been anthracidized, and what happens, the gastric and the duodenum are anastomosis. The anastomosis occur between the gastric and the duodenum. What happens, see here, see we can see that this half of the stomach is removed, and we can see that the atherectomy is done, and the rest of the stomach is anastomosed to the duodenum. So in Billroth 1 procedure there is gastroduodenostomy. So what happens in that, the affected portion is removed, and the remaining part is sutured to the duodenum, which is known as duodenal anastomosis, and the procedure is known as Billroth 1 procedure, that is gastroduodenostomy. And the second procedure is Billroth 2nd procedure, in which what happens, there will be gastroduodenostomy, that is the 50% of the stomach will be removed, and the vagotomy will be done, and 50% of the stomach will be removed, and the remaining stomach is anastomosed to the jejunum, that is the remaining stomach is anastomosed to the jejunum. So Billroth 1 procedure, Billroth 2 procedure. Billroth 1 procedure, it is been anastomosed to the stomach is the remaining stomach is anastomosed to the duodenum. In Billroth 2nd procedure, gastroduodenostomy, the 50% of the stomach is removed, and the remaining part of the stomach is anastomosed to the jejunum. Then total gastrectomy. Total gastrectomy, the removal of the stomach. In this and after that, there will be the person is advised to take low and small frequent diets, and these all includes the management of this. So management, we have seen the person should have balanced meal, and they should be between snacking among the meal. Then avoid bedtime snacking, eat slowly and chew the food properly. And second comes under that is smoking, stop smoking, explore community support for the cessation of smoking. Then third management is stress reduction. Stress reduction, we have to participate the client or the person in recreational hobbies like what all hobbies the person like, what that all hobbies were for the relaxation of his mind. Then the surgical management include vagotomy, anthrectomy, Billroth 1 procedure, that is gastroduodenostomy, and Billroth 2nd procedure, gastrojejunostomy. Thank you, and thank you.